What's up guys, it's your boy Lucas here. Welcome back to the channel. Today I want to talk about the 18-35 1.8 DC HSM Art from Sigma. I want to see if this lens is still worth it in 2020. Okay, let's talk about the general specs of this lens. This lens is made especially for APS-C cameras. It weighs around 810 grams. It costs around $700 or 799 euros. It has an aperture of 1.8 all the way to 35. The 35mm equivalent focal length is 29 to 56 millimeters. I know I said it is an 18 to 35mm lens, but you still have to take the 1.6 time crop of Canon into consideration when using this lens. It has internal focus and internal zoom, so that's very great about this lens. What makes this lens different? The fact that it is a wide-angle lens 1.8 made especially for APS-C sensor cameras. It gives you the same exposure and the same depth of field as a full-frame lens at 2.8 on a full-frame camera. So Sigma has factored in that an APS-C sensor is smaller than a full-frame sensor, which is awesome. Let me show you guys some sample images. Now that I have photographed with this lens, I want to talk about things that I've noticed while doing so. I've noticed that there's a lot of chromatic aberration while photographing a white subject or element, or there's a lot of highlights in the photo. You can notice a lot of chromatic aberration. For example, this photo, you can see that the edges of the nose or the water droplets here on the umbrella are pretty much purple, so there's a lot of chromatic aberration there. If I take another photo like this photo of this bridge and I zoom in on the bridge, you can see here on the edges of the bridge you can also see chromatic aberration, but there's no chromatic aberration in other parts of the photo. So I think there's something with white subjects or white backgrounds or highlights where there's a lot of white in the photo, you can see chromatic aberration. I mean, it is not hard to, get rid of that. You can do that in Lightroom or in Photoshop. It doesn't matter, but it's there. You can see it when photographing with white backgrounds. Another thing that I've noticed is that the further the subject is from the lens, the more unsharp it gets. For example, this photo, if I zoom in on the face, you can see that the face is not entirely sharp, and I've set the focus on the face. But after I took the photo, I've noticed that the leaves in the back, like this part, is in focus, but the face is not entirely in focus. I've taken this photo 4 to 5 times consecutively, but I still couldn't get the face to be in focus, even though the focus box was on the face. So I think the further the subject is from the lens, the less sharp the subject gets. Now onto the focus test. The first one that I did was me ducking out of frame and then standing back up to see how long it took the lens to focus back on my face. As you can see, it takes a little bit of time to focus back on my face, like a second or two. Nothing dramatic, but it takes a couple of seconds. The second test that I did was me moving around in frame to see if I can keep focus on my face. As you can see, it does a pretty good job of holding the focus on my face while I move around. So if you have children that you need to photograph and they move a lot, it can do that pretty well. Another thing that I wanted to find out about this lens is how sharp it is. So I've taken a couple of photos with different aperture to see at which aperture the entire photo is sharp. If we look at this first photo that I've taken at 1.8, you can see that the middle part of the image is sharp. So around this part of the bridge, it's sharp. But if we go to the edges of the bridge, you can see that this part is not sharp. I've taken one at 2.8. You can see that this part is still unsharp. At 4, this part is still unsharp, but this part here is sharper. at f5.6, 80 to 90% of the image is sharper, I would say. Still, this part is not entirely sharp, but at f8 you can see that this part is pretty much sharp. So if you want to take a photo that is 100% sharp, you have to photograph at f8 with this lens. If you want it to be 80 to 90% sharp, you can set the aperture to 5.6. Okay, the two questions that remain to be answered are: who is this lens for, and is it still worth it in 2020? If you're someone who is not thinking about buying a full frame camera in the near future, I would say invest in this lens because it is cheaper than most wide angle full frame lenses. If you have the 50mm 1.8 from Canon, you know that with the crop factor you get around a 75mm. So if you want the 35mm and the 50mm focal length, this lens is a good lens to have. The only thing you have to keep in mind is if you're going to take portraits, medium and close-up portraits are going to be sharper than wide-angle portraits. Now, is it still worth it in 2020? I would say yeah, it is made for APS-C sensor cameras. The lens is cheaper than most full-frame wide-angle lenses. The aperture is 1.8 all the way to 35mm. It is sharper than most kit lenses that I have photographed with, and the autofocus is pretty decent. So I would say yeah, it is still worth it in 2020. That's it, guys. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, don't forget to leave a like or a comment down below. Let me know what you thought of the video or the lens, the sample images. Let's have a conversation about this lens. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Turn on the notification bell. Follow me on my other social media. The links are in the description down here, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.